I bought a small house with my brother George a couple years back. We hosted Christmas the first year we lived in the house, just as a way of getting the family to see the place and getting everyone together for the first time and forever. We don't have the biggest family in the world, so it was the two of us. Our parents, our aunt and uncle, cousin, and our sister and two nephews. Our sister came with our nephews and her husband first to help us out with the cooking and preparing. They brought their dog Mika along as well. Since they lived 2 hours away, they were going to be spending the night at our house. The rest of our family lives under an hour away, so they wouldn't be staying. Not that that house would have much more room for additional people staying over anyway. During our Christmas dinner, at one point we talked about some of the murders that happened in our area recently. Bodies had been found in the woods in our county. It wasn't a topic that we kept going long, as our mom and my sister wanted us to drop it for the sake of the holiday and the kids. After dinner, we all had some wine in the living room with a Christmas movie on in the background as we talked. After a few hours, the family started to slowly leave, until it was just my brother and I and my sister, her husband, and her kids. The kids went to bed before us. The four of us stayed up later, having more wine. My girlfriend ended up coming over past 10 to spend the rest of the night with me, since all of her family had gone home. Eventually, Christmas night was over, and it was time to go to bed. I woke up to my girlfriend shaking me. The room was still dark. I groggily looked at the clock next to my bed, and it said 2-something a.m. I asked my girlfriend what the issue was, and she whispered,
Listen.
I listened and heard Mika out in the hall growling. I got out of bed and entered the hall to see what was going on. Then I saw that the back door to our house was wide open, and a breeze of cold air started to hit me in the face. Mika was looking out the door. I checked if anyone was out there, and as I was at the back door, I heard my brother's voice call out my name for the darkness outside. He sounded like he was far away in the woods. I was worried he was in trouble or needed help with something. I went back to my room to tell my girlfriend as I put my shoes and coat on. I stepped outside with a flashlight. There was a light dusting of snow on the ground, enough to see footmarks leading from the back door down to the back deck towards the woods. I yelled back George's name very loudly. I heard his voice call back my name. It was confirmed he was in the woods now. But oddly, as I entered the woods, his footprints slowly faded and got harder to see, until they were just impossible to continue following entirely. I screamed back at the top of my lungs, "Where are you? What's wrong?" I once again heard George's voice call back just my name. Every time he called me, his voice was the same distance away. I was uncomfortable getting any further away from my house because I didn't want to get lost in the woods. I tried finally calling George's phone, but he didn't pick up. I continued a little further into the woods, but now George is yelling,
Stop.
As much as I yelled out into the woods, there was dead silence, not even the sound of a bug in the freezing cold. Just the sound of the light breeze, and suddenly my phone rang. I was hopeful it was George, but it was my girlfriend. I picked up and she said, Chet.
George is in his bedroom right now.
What? I said, that didn't make any sense. I was hearing his voice this entire time in the woods. I asked her to check if my sister's husband was also still on of the pull-out couches, and 30 seconds later, she said yes. Suddenly, I felt like I wasn't alone in the woods. Like anyone was about to grab me from any direction. I turned back the way I came and started running as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I saw the backyard light from my house becoming more visible through the trees. I made it back to my house, and everyone was awake now. George and everyone else had a look of horror on their faces when I explained that Mika was growling, looking at the wide open back door and the fact that there were footprints leading into the woods. But the scariest part was that I thought for sure that the voice I was hearing was that of George. And whoever it was knew my name. We contemplated calling the police for half an hour and then ended up doing so. A police officer came and just asked us any questions, like if anything was stolen, if we know anyone that may mean us harm, etc. Then, within half an hour, and after telling us to call back if anything else happens, he left. I don't know if I think this had anything to do with the murders that were going on at this time in our county, but I did think it was worth mentioning in the story. When I was 19, I went to a college 2 hours north of my hometown. Maybe once every month or so, I would head back home for the weekend to stay with my family. And while I was there, it wasn't unusual for me to go on a late night run before I would shower and go to bed. On this particular weekend, I had actually remembered to bring my running shoes, something I would often forget to take home. I looked at the clock, realized it was a little before midnight, and figured I could fit in a couple miles or so before settling down for the night. Now, something that needs to be mentioned is my family lived in the middle of nowhere. We had a nice house, just almost all around the area was covered in endless cornfields and dirt roads. Honestly, I can't even remember where our nearest neighbor was, which should give you an idea of how remote it actually was. Anyway, I began my run on the usual dirt roads surrounded on both sides by cornfields. Looking back, it was actually a pretty creepy setting, especially considering the time of night. Though, I usually take some earbuds to listen to music, which usually gets me in a different headspace and causes me to forget all about it. I was running for maybe 10 minutes when the sound of a car coming up on the road behind me overcame the music from my earbuds. It startled me at first, as I didn't think any cars would be out this late, especially this deep into the middle of nowhere. Though, I simply got over to the side of the road thinking the car would pass. But no. Whatever reason, this random vehicle stayed behind me, just following me as I ran. I didn't know what kind of vehicle it was, as each time I looked behind me, all I could see was the blinding light from the headlights. At this point, I was a little on edge, as there was clearly enough space to pass me. I decided to just stay calm and continue on my run. I'm a pretty big dude, and I was confident if it came to it, I could handle whoever was driving the vehicle. About a couple minutes later, and the driver of the vehicle steps on it, so as to now be side by side to me, I now noticed the vehicle was a very old white van. The driver's side window then rolled down, and I stopped in response so I could see what this person wanted. But as the window rolled down, I quickly realized how dark it was inside. Like so much so that all I could see was the driver's black hoodie, not even his face.
Hey man, do you want a ride? It's raining pretty hard outside now.
But the weird thing is that it wasn't, not even enough to be considered a drizzle. I held back my response for a second, as I could now clearly hear shuffling around in the back of the van. It's safe to say the situation wasn't sitting well with me, and so I responded to the guy, thanking him, but overall declining his request. I turned around to continue running, and luckily, the van now sped past me, down the road and into the darkness. I thought that would be the end of it, but of course, it wasn't. Not even 5 minutes passed since the encounter, when I could see the van in front of me stopped in the middle of the road, but not like on the side, rather it was sideways, so as to block the whole road. As I got closer, I could make out a few people, maybe 3 or 4 wearing all black walking near the van. I figured whatever was happening I didn't want any part of, and decided to just head back home the way I came, instead of completing my usual loop. But to my absolute horror, as I turned around, I could see another pair of headlights gaining on me. I didn't know if it had anything to do with the van, but considering the area I was in and the time of night, there was a good chance it did. Honestly, I felt trapped. I was frozen like a deer in headlights, but that was short-lived, as I could now hear multiple footsteps running on the road behind me. That's when I realized the men near the van were now charging full speed directly towards me. I had no choice but to ditch the road and run in some random direction in the middle of the cornfield. I ran for a good 10 minutes, and for a good chunk of that, I swear I could hear footsteps behind me. But I was completely alone at this point. Luckily, my phone didn't fall to my pocket while I was running, and I was able to track down where I was and how to get home. Now, considering I was in the middle of a cornfield, it took me about 45 minutes, though I never saw anything the rest of the night. This will most likely forever be the most disturbing thing I'll experience. Though the fact that they trapped me and started to fall on sprinting towards me, at least to me, confirms my suspicion that they did not have good intentions. I would file a police report that night, but I haven't heard or seen anything since.